To take paper to draw. A World Through Lines by John Berger. Sometimes I have a dream in which I am my present age with grown-up children and newspaper editors on the telephone, yet nevertheless have to leave and pass 9 months of the year in the school where I was sent as a boy. In the dream, I think of these months as a regrettable exile, but it never occurs to me to refuse to go. In life, I ran away from that school when I was 16. The war was on, and I went to London. Between the air raid sirens and amid the debris of bombing, I had a single idea. I wanted to draw naked women all day long. I was enrolled in an art school. There was not a lot of competition. Nearly everyone over 18 was in the services, and I drew in the daytime and I drew in the evenings. There was an exceptional teacher in the school at that time, an elderly painter, a refugee from fascism named Bernard Benensky. He said very little, and his breath smelled of dill pickles. On the same imperial-sized sheet of paper was rationed and we had only 2 sheets a day, beside my clumsy, unstudied, impetuous drawing, Bernard Benensky would boldly draw part of the model's body in such a way as to make clearer its endlessly subtle structure and movement. After he was gone, I would spend the next 10 minutes dumbfounded, looking from his drawing to the model, and vice versa. Thus, I learned to question with my eyes the mystery of anatomy and of love. Whilst outside in the night sky, I heard the RAF fighters crossing the city to intercept the German bombers before they reached the coast. The ankle of the foot on which her weight was posed was vertically under the dimple of her neck, directly vertical. When I was in Istanbul recently, I asked my friends if they could arrange for me to meet the writer Latif Tekin. I had read a few translated extracts from 2 novels she had written about life in the shanty towns on the edge of the city, and the little I had read deeply impressed me with its imagination and authenticity. She herself must have been brought up in a shanty town. My friends arranged a dinner, and Latif came. I do not speak Turkish, so naturally they offered to interpret. She was sitting beside me. Something made me tell my friends, no, don't bother. We'll manage somehow. The 2 of us looked at each other with some suspicion. In another life I might have been an elderly police superintendent, interrogating a pretty, shifty, fierce woman of 30, repeatedly picked up for larceny. In fact, in this our only life, we were both storytellers, without a word in common. All we had were our observations, our habits of narration, our Aesopian sadness. Suspicion gave way to shyness. I took out a notebook and did a drawing of myself as one of her readers. She drew a boat upside down to show she couldn't draw. I turned the paper round so that it was right way up. She made a drawing to show that her drawn boats always sank. I said there were birds at the bottom of the sea. She said there was an anchor in the sky. Like everybody else at the table, we were drinking Rocky. Then she told me a story about the municipal bulldozers destroying the houses built in the night on the city's edge. I told her about an old woman who lived in a van. The more we drew, the quicker we understood. In the end, we were laughing at our speed, even when the stories were monstrous or sad. She took a walnut and, dividing it in two, held it up to say, halves of the same brain. Then somebody put on some Pitashi music and all the guests began to dance. In the summer of 1916, Picasso drew on a page of a medium-sized sketchbook the torso of a nude woman. It is neither one of his invented figures, it hasn't enough bravura, nor is it a figure drawn from life. It hasn't enough of the idiosyncrasy of the immediate. The face of the woman is unrecognizable, for the head is scarcely indicated. However, the torso is a kind of face. It has familiar expression, a face of love, become hesitant or sad. The drawing is distinct in feeling from others in the sketchbook. The other drawings play rough games with cubist or neoclassical devices, some looking back on the previous still life period, others preparing for the Harlequin themes that we would take up the following year, when he did the decor for the ballet parade. The torso of the woman is very fragile. Usually Picasso drew with such verve and directness that every scribble reminds you of the act of drawing and of the pleasure of that act. It is this that makes his drawings insolent. Even the weeping faces of the Guernica period, or the skulls he drew during the German occupation, possess an insolence. They know no servitude. The act of drawing them is triumphant. The drawing in question is an exception. Half drawn, for Picasso didn't continue on for long. Half woman, half vase. Half seen as by an anger, half seen as by a child. The apparition on the page counts for far more than the act of drawing. It is she, not the draftsman, who insists by her very tentativeness. My hunch is that in Picasso's imagination this drawing belonged somehow to Eva Goel. She had died only 6 months earlier of tuberculosis. They had lived together, Eva and Picasso. Into his now famous cubist and still lifes, he had inserted and painted her name, transforming austere canvases into love letters. Jolie, Eva. Now she was dead, and he was living alone. The image lies on the paper as in a memory. This hesitant torso has come from another floor of experience, has come in the middle of a sleepless night, and still retains its key to the door. Perhaps these three stories suggest the three distinct ways in which drawings can function. There are those that study and question the visible, those that record and communicate ideas, and those done from memory. Even in front of drawings by old masters, the distinction between the three is important, for each type survives in a different way. Each speaks in a different tense. To each we respond with a different capacity of imagination. And the first kind of drawing, at one time such drawings were appropriately called studies. The lines of the paper are traces left behind by the artist's gaze, which is ceaselessly leaving, going out, interrogating the strangeness, the enigma of what is before his eyes, however ordinary and everyday this may be. The sum total of the lines on the paper narrates an optical immigration by which the artist, following his own gaze, settles on the person or tree or animal or mountain being drawn. And if the drawing succeeds, it stays there forever. In his abdomen and left leg of a nude man standing in profile, Leonardo is still there. There in the groin of the man, drawn with red chalk on a salmon-pink prepared paper. There in the hollow behind the knee, where the femoral biceps and the semi-membranous muscle separate to allow for the insertion of the twin calf muscles. And Jacques Degain, who married the heiress Eva Stalpert van der Wielen, and so could give up engraving, is still there, in the astounding diaphanous wings and dragonflies he drew with black chalk and brown ink for his friends at the University of Leiden around 1600. If one forgets circumstantial details, technical means, kinds of paper, and so on, such drawings do not date. For the act of concentrated looking, of questioning the appearance of an object before one's eyes, has changed very little through the millennia. The ancient Egyptians stared at fish in a way comparable to the Byzantines on the Bosporus or Matisse in the Mediterranean. What has changed, according to history and ideology, is the visual rendering of what artists dared not question: God, power, justice, good, evil. Trivia could always be visually questioned. That is why exceptional drawings of trivia carry with them their own here and now, putting their humanity into relief. Between 1603 and 1609, the Flemish draftsman and painter Ronert Savary traveled in Central Europe. 80 drawings of people in the street marked with the title "Taken from Life" have survived. Until recently, they were thought to be done by the great painter Peter Bruegel. One of them, drawn in Prague, depicts a beggar seated on the ground. He wears a black cap. Wrapped round one of his feet is a white rag. Over his shoulders is a black cloak. He is staring ahead, very straight. His dark, sullen eyes are at the same level as a dog's would be. His hat, upturned for money, is on the ground beside this bandaged foot. No comment, no other figure, no placing, a tramp of nearly 400 years ago. We encounter this today. Before this scrap of paper, only 6 inches square, we come across him as we might come across him on the way to an airport or on a grass bank of the highway above Latif's shantytown. One moment faces another, and they are as close as 2 facing pages in today's unopened newspaper. A moment of 1607 and a moment of 1987. Time is obliterated by an eternal present. Tense, present, indicative. In the second category of drawings, the traffic, the transport, goes in the opposite direction. It is now a question of bringing to the paper what is already in the mind's eye, delivery rather than immigration. Often such drawings were done as sketches or working drawings for paintings. They bring together, they arrange, they set a scene. Since there is no direct interest in the visible, they are far more dependent upon the dominant virtual language of the period, and are so usually more datable in their essence, more narrowly qualifiable as Renaissance, Mannerist, 18th century, or whatever. There are no confrontations, no encounters to be found in this category. Rather, we look through a window onto a man's capacity to dream, to construct an alternative world in his imagination. And everything depends upon the space created within this alternative. Usually it is meager, the direct consequence of imitation, false virtuosity. Such meager drawings still possess an artisanal interest. Through them we see how pictures are made and joined, like cabinets or clocks. But they do not speak directly to us. For this to happen, the space created within the drawing has to seem as large as the earth's or the sky's space. Then we can feel the breath of life. Poussin could create such a space. So could Rembrandt. That the achievement is rare in European drawing may be because such space only opens up when extraordinary mastery is combined with extraordinary modesty. To create such an immense space with ink marks on a sheet of paper, one has to know oneself to be very small. Such drawings are visions of what would be if. Most record visions of the past which are now close to us, like private gardens. When there is enough space, the vision remains open, and we enter. Tense, conditional. Finally, there are the drawings done from memory. Many are notes jotted down for later use, a way of collecting and of keeping impressions and information. We look at them with curiosity if we are interested in the artist or the historical subject. In the 15th century, the wooden rakes used for raking up hay were exactly the same as those still used in the mountains where I live. The most important drawings in this category, however, are made, as was probably the case in the Picasso sketchbook, in order to exercise a memory which is haunting, in order to take an image out of the mind once and for all and put it on paper. The unbearable image may be sweet, sad, frightening, attractive, cruel. Each has its own way of being unbearable. The artist in whose work this mode of drawing is most obvious is Goya. He made drawing after drawing in the spirit of exorcism. Sometimes his subject was a prisoner being tortured during the Inquisition to exorcise his or her sins, a double, terrible exorcism. I see a red wash and sanguine drawing by Goya of a woman in prison. She is chained by her ankles to the wall. Her shoes have holes in them. She lies on her side, her skirt pulled up above her knees. She bends her arm over her face and eyes, so she need not see where she is. The drawn page is like a stain on the stone floor on which she is lying. It is indelible. There is no bringing together here, no setting of a scene, nor is there any questioning of the visible. The drawing simply declares, I saw this. Historic, past tense. A drawing from any of the three categories, when it is sufficiently inspired, when it becomes miraculous, acquires another temporal dimension. The miracle begins with the basic fact that drawings, unlike paintings, are usually monochrome. Paintings, with their colors, their tonalities, their extensive light and shade, compete with nature. They try to seduce the visible, to solicit the scene painted. Drawings cannot do this. They are diagrammatic. That is their virtue. Drawings are only notes on paper, the sheets rationed during the war, the paper napkin folded into the form of a boat and put into a rocky glass where it sank. The secret is the paper. The paper becomes what we see through the lines and yet remains itself. A drawing made around 1553 by Peter Bruegel is identified in the catalogues as a mountain landscape with a river, village, and castle. In reproduction, its quality will be fatally lost. Better to describe it. It was drawn with brown inks and wash. The gradations of the pale wash are very slight. The paper lends itself between the lines to becoming tree, stone, grass, water, cloud. Yet it can never, for an instant, be confused with the substance of any of these things, for evidently and emphatically it remains a sheet of paper with fine lines drawn upon it. This is both obvious and, if one reflects upon it, so strange that it is hard to grasp. There are certain paintings which animals could read. No animal could ever read a drawing. In a few great drawings, like the Bruegel landscape, everything appears to exist in space. The complexity of everything vibrates. Yet what one is looking at is only a project on paper. Reality and project become inseparable. One finds oneself on the threshold before the creation of the world. Such drawings, using the future tense, foresee forever.